Welcome to The Point. Today, our focus is COVID-19 impact on higher education in North America. As a note to the live audience, please submit your questions on Facebook Live. Panelists are providing their views here as practitioners in the higher education field and not speaking on behalf of associated universities. So let's welcome our panelists, Professor Sandip Mazumder. Professor Mazumder is faculty at Ohio State University, Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department. Prior to joining OSU in 2004, he served in the industry for nearly 7 years. Welcome, Professor Mazumder. Professor Arijit Sengupta is an Associate Dean of Accreditation and Technology Systems and Professor of Information Systems and Business Analytics at Florida International University, College of Business. Prior to joining FIU, Professor Sengupta was Associate Dean and served on the faculty at the Raj Soin College of Business at Wright State University, Kelly School of Business at Indiana University, and Robinson College of Business at Georgia State University. Welcome, Professor Sengupta. Professor Debobroto Dey. Professor Dey is a Marion B. Ingersoll Professor of Information Systems at Foster School of Business, University of Washington, Seattle. He held founding director of Foster's MSIS program and was ISOM department chair at UW. Welcome, Professor Dey. And we have Professor Shoibal Ray. Professor Ray is a full professor and James McGill Chair in Supply Chain Management in the DeSoto Faculty of Management of McGill University in Canada and a member of Royal Society of Canada College. He's also academic director of the Bensadown School of Retail Management and leads the development of all aspects of the school. He was previously the Vice Dean, Faculty and Research, and held the DeSoto Business Leadership Chair. He has been funded by most of the agencies in Quebec and Canada. Welcome, Professor Ray. Thank you all for joining the panel today. Now let's put things in context. Colleges around the US and Canada and elsewhere around the world are formulating plans to welcome students back to campus this fall. And hopefully that's a good news. We don't know really where we stand, where we are going to stand in the next 2-3 months time frame, given everything is uncertain with COVID-19. Now, the big picture here is that the social distancing could still be in place. But for many universities, the revenue that comes that has to be taken into account. And with online sessions in place, it's just a little different. We already saw quite a few lawsuits around the country, here in the US. Now, I think they have obviously options. Every university has that option, but it's going to be difficult not to reopen. Now, if colleges reopen in the fall, then it's what are the key issues that we are going to face as students, as parents, and very importantly, as faculty. So let's hear it out from the panelists here. What are the concerns? What are the different strategies that you can potentially you can see in the universities? Testing, the capability of testing with students on arrival and on an ongoing basis. Lecture classes, how that will get adjusted. Tracing, contact tracing. Would there be facilities or tools in place? Some universities may consider smaller set of students in campus, perhaps those who are only needed. How about the social gatherings? So all of this combines a variety of questions that come to students and parents' mind. And we will go through some of them. We have asked many students along the process and gotten several questions from them. But let me start first understanding each one of your viewpoint from where you stand. How does it look for you in the fall? What do you see from your vantage point? And what are the implications from enrollment standpoint, from equity standpoint, where we know that lower income students will probably be suffering more disproportionately? What about the experience of the students? I would invite Professor Mazumder, if you could give your commentaries on that.
Okay, so first of all, Rajoshi, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm really honored to be part of this panel along with all the other colleagues who are also eminent experts in their respective universities. I think the questions you posed are very pertinent, and I also agree that most universities are, even though they haven't formalized a plan yet, I think most universities will reopen. This is my feeling, gut feeling, because the flip side of that is very dark. Just as a side note, it is very easy. This whole transition process, what I found was that the transition was relatively easy for faculty. The administrators keep worrying about faculty. Will we be able to deliver lectures? Will we be able to do the things we are supposed to do? And what I found was that was relatively easy. What was not easy is when you look at the whole picture from the student's perspective. There is a presumption that every student has technology, every student will be able to attend online lectures and follow through with whatever they are supposed to do. That is far from the truth. So given that, I think universities will be in a position where they will feel like, if we don't reopen, then things will go really wrong. So I think that's what's going to happen. Now, then comes all the measures. What are we going to do to really, ensure the health of students? And this is where I think the health of the faculty needs to be considered first. Because again, the issue is if one student gets sick and he or she is quarantined or asked to be quarantined, that's not such a big problem. But if, 25, 30, 40% of the faculty gets sick, then it will be difficult to run the university. So in one case, you have to look at it from the perspective of the student. In the other case, you have to look at it from the perspective of the faculty. So I'll stop here. I'll let the other panelists add their views, and then we can go further.
Great points there, Professor. Now, Professor Sengupta, we want to hear your opinion, but could you also color it with some of your background, given you have um, the technology domain uh, as your expertise, mobile technologies, um, RFID, analytics, data modeling. You are kind of sitting in a perfect storm here. So as you kind of give your opinions, can you also color it with some of the background, some of the things that you're looking at? Professor Sengupta. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rajeshi. And extremely honored to be part of this really great panel, particularly all my colleagues and several of whom I have personally followed their research as well. So thank you for inviting. As Rajeshi said, I have been working in technology for a long time, and at FIU, I manage our technology systems team. So most of our technology that drives our accreditation processes, student engagement processes, career services, all of that is under my management. Now I have been given the duty of something a lot more sensitive, a lot more pertinent on how we are going to handle um, the opening of the university. And I agree that the universities are going to open. And at FIU, we are already making the plans for initial reopening for faculty and staff. Now, as you know, FIU is an AAUP unionized college. So faculty are not required to be on campus in the summer anyway. But administration and staff we are planning that they will be returning on June 1st. So that's the current plan. And I was telling Rajarshi that this could change between now and June 1st, obviously. But that is the tentative plan. And I have been given the duty to look at technology that could assist us in facilitating this process. So I have created a small committee of our information systems faculty, and we all do research on analytics and blockchain technologies to see if we can use some technology to provide students and faculty with we don't want to become big brothers, right? We don't want to come and ask for all kinds of private questions. So we are trying to come up with whatever the middle ground is. How much can student and faculty share in an extremely private, confidential method? One of the things that the university is currently considering is an app that is going to be distributed to all the students and faculty. And before they come into the campus, they would be required to log into this app and enter some basic things like their temperature, basic symptoms, if they're feeling okay, if there are certain things that are not, and then the app is supposed to give them a recommendation on whether they should be coming into campus or not, and things like that. Obviously, how many people would be confident and would be comfortable on using this app is a big question mark right now. So we're looking at other alternatives as well. We are looking into um, Wi-Fi tracing. That's another thing that we use Cisco CMX here at FIU. And that does have a lot of analytics capabilities to trace students as they move from one building to another. and that can be done without collecting any private information at all. One of our concerns is that what would happen if we do find a student that reports that they are positive? Would that create a huge panic? And that those are the types of situations that we are going to try to see if we can avoid. I would let the other panelists talk about their viewpoints as well.
Thank you, Professor. I think these are some of these things we probably have to expand on a bit more and see how others react to it. Let me invite Professor Day. You have been in the in the eye of the storm back in March and even in February in Seattle, and also as a professor, you had tremendous amount of work in the digital piracy information security field. While you give your commentaries in the from your vantage point, could you also color it from your geographical perspective and your research perspective?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Rajarshi, for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to be with so many distinguished scholars. I would touch on a few things in terms of, I agree with Sandip that not opening the university in fall is not an option. That just does not work. What happened is that, like many other businesses, we universities actually got caught in a situation that we were just not prepared for. And at this point, and through summer, we will be doing most of the education online. And we have been asked to stay ready for fall as well, just in case something happens. This quarter and last quarter, we actually had to switch to the online setting without much of a preparation. Even though the technology is great today, the online experience is not the same for the students as well as the teachers. So for example, for us instructors, the biggest casualty is humor. When you have 40 students in class, everybody has to be on mute, and people don't unmute themselves to laugh and then mute themselves. So it's the biggest casualty from our point of view. Some courses are easier in an online setting, other courses are not. Especially, when we teach strategy and things like that, or policy, you want a classroom that is very interactive. People are bringing in their perspective and sharing it with other students. So those kind of situations become very difficult to handle in an online situation. And the bigger the class size is, the more problematic it is. So technology-wise, I think we have to go a lot farther than where we are. Even though online education has been, and MOOCs and all that have been there for quite some time, when the rubber meets the road, that's when you realize that the technology is not good enough. Also, the disparity across student bodies or students' constituencies in terms of technology makes it difficult. For example, I have students who come from neighborhoods that are not that well privileged, and their internet speeds are really, really poor, and their ability to do collaborative work online is very, very limited. So these are some of the problems that we are facing. Hopefully by fall, things will work out. I think we are in complete battle readiness form, if you want to call it that, to deal with things. And it's not just one school or one college, it's the entire university, including health services and things like that. But some of the challenges remain. So for example, what happens when you find somebody positive in a classroom? How do you deal with that? Preserving the faculty, as one of the panelists says, is very important, because that's how you keep it going. And there are people who are aged, and they are more they are prone to risk much more than others, and things like that. So at this point, it's not clear exactly how it will turn out. And currently the situation looks a little grim. But we are hoping that, by fall, things will fall into place. As far as Seattle is concerned, yes, we were the epicenter, at least the initial stages. But at this point, things are pretty good here in terms of what we are seeing in infection rate as well as in morbidity. So we are pretty hopeful that come fall, things will become better, unless, of course, there is a resurgence of this epidemic, and then we don't know what to do.
No, thank you, Professor Day. You're absolutely right. I think Seattle and Washington State is doing much better than many other states at the moment, and hope it keeps that way. But given the speed of things, like you said, the resurgence, we don't know, but we almost have to prepare for it. So, Professor Ray, you are in Canada for a long time, and particularly in Quebec, Montreal, and you are very well connected within the community and the agencies, governments, businesses, retail, all aspects of supply chain. So while you kind of give your commentaries, could you also blend it with some of the things that you are watching from a supply chain perspective, which is obviously completely disruptive in many ways, and what you see in the future, not just from university and Canada perspective, but overall supply chain perspective as well.
Thanks a lot, Rajusi, for inviting me, and it is an honor to be with this August panel. Really appreciate it. So you asked Professor Day about this, that Seattle was in the eye of the storm at the beginning. In Canada, at least, Montreal is now at the eye of the storm, though perhaps very much to some extent focused mostly on this long-term care homes, but still it is, in terms of the number, it is actually at the eye of the storm. So we do not know what will happen in the near future, at least. In terms of the plan for the fall, like all universities, we have been told to get ready for online. They are hoping at least some of them will be offline. I have my doubts whether everything will be offline. There is some discussion that the programs where the students perhaps doesn't need to be in the campus that much, or where the social distancing measures will be much more difficult to implement. Let's say undergraduate programs with lots of students, they might become offline, whereas the smaller, they might become online, the smaller programs offline, and so on. There might be some programs where lab work is essential that will become offline, but some of the others online. So people are still playing with, and to some extent, even universities are at a don't know exactly, because it will depend to some extent on government regulations, what the government allows and what the government doesn't allow. So that will also come into the picture, because we sometimes ask the university administration and they also don't know exactly, because the government rules change very frequently depending on the situation, and it might go on changing until so we have been told to get ready for online, but hopefully some of the things will be offline, or even if the students are not there, professors can, because we have heard actually the professors were telling that even if we are doing online education, can we do it in a classroom rather than sitting in our homes, that we go to in front of, even if it is a empty classroom or 10 student classroom, but at least we are in a classroom moving around rather than sitting in a chair at home and doing the teaching actually. So that has also come into the picture. So so hopefully this will happen in terms of the business. And so this is an issue similar to what we are facing in terms of education. The business, the economy is in shambles, and this is one of the few cases perhaps, or perhaps the only situation where both the supply and the demand side have been decimated. Otherwise, all the other, if you think about the disasters, it was either the demand side or the supply side. This one, both of them are decimated. And so even after economy comes back, we do not know how many people will be going to the stores. So even if you open stores, what will happen? The move to the online, how sticky will it be? How long will it persist? All these types of things, and the supply chains, when will it open? There is a lot of discussion both in US as well as in Canada about making the supply chains more local. But can we make it local? Just because we want it to be local doesn't mean that we can make it local. We have not invested in many of these things for a long time. So we cannot just by the flipping a switch make it suddenly local. Some of them, yes, but many of them it would not be possible. And then all this, the issue of, we saw already in terms of the competition for the PPE, that there will be a competition for many of these items. It's not only the supply chains have been, they have going through a lot of pains, but there is a huge competition for the limited amount of supply. So who can get it fast? So this will, and it's today for PPE, next if there is a vaccine, there will be same for the vaccines. All these things will come into the picture. And so the supply chains, both the supply and the demand side, will take us quite a bit of time to get into what we call remotely normal. So it's not only the universities will take some time to get, and the business will take even longer actually.
Makes sense. Universities are the ones who actually shut it down at the very beginning. College campuses are quite an unique sort of framework to deal with. So that was probably a great thing, which may have reduced the infection overall. The question of when can it open back and how things happen, that's gonna be very interesting. McKinsey did one study and painted different scenarios, and not the gloom and doom scenario, but the sort of the middle of the way scenario is where potentially you could be doing online classes, at least for some people, for a while. And I want to kind of understand from, and Professor Day has already articulated a few experiences there with the online sessions, but let me hear out from the rest is what are the challenges you are facing, and how you are trying to engage your students online, and you know, in a more of a classroom setting. We'll come back to the other challenges beyond classroom shortly, but let's hear out from Professor Mazumder, if you want to give some commentaries on your online classes.
So, um, so I've been teaching online classes since about 2013. So this is not new to me, but I think it all depends on what you're teaching. And I think some of the panelists already mentioned it. What's the subject matter? Some material is more amenable to online delivery and some are not. I am from the engineering discipline, and engineers, as you know, they like to build things, and that is what they are touted for. That is why you go to engineering school for, to have a hands-on experience. No one likes an engineering education where you're just lectured, which is kind of what we went through at IIT to a big extent. But that has changed over the past 30 years. Universities who are highly rated engineering programs, they are highly rated because they have a lot of hands-on experience. And I believe the same goes for medical schools, the medicine degrees. Ohio State, these two are the two largest colleges in our universities, the College of Engineering and the School of Medicine. And so for these two colleges and others, perhaps, my son, he's a music major. He's going through hell, really, because 60% of his time he spends doing rehearsals with orchestras and ensembles, and none of that is happening, obviously. So schools like that and professions like that, it is very difficult to do things 100% online, especially in public universities where you have classes of the strength of 100, 120, 150 students in each class. So I think that's a big challenge, and I don't see that ever happening online because that is sort of contrary to the philosophy of a hands-on education. Fundamentally, even if it's possible to do it, it just doesn't work. You're not giving them the right kind of education in that framework, in the online framework. But of course, there are other classes. Like I, for example, teach a lot of courses that are heavy on computation, where students can do most of the thing remotely, provided, and that's where the if comes in, provided they have good resources. We often take it for granted that these students have a personal laptop, a high-end Mac or something, and they can do any kind of computational work. But the truth is that is not at all the case. They have to actually use VPN and log into the department computers to even run some of these calculations. They just don't have the luxury. And very early along the transition process, we started getting complaints along these lines that, we are being asked to do something that is just not possible for us because we don't have the resources. And so, the university, Ohio State actually instituted a pass-fail degree this semester, which said that if you get a grade above a D grade, you can choose to get just a pass option. But that was just, an emergency situation. I don't think that can happen semester after semester, because obviously then how do you even contribute to your GPA if it's just a pass-fail or satisfactory, unsatisfactory? So I think it's very much subject dependent. I mean, people talk about MOOCs. Yes, we've been doing MOOCs in this world for a long time now, but you have to understand that when you sign on to a MOOCs course, the first question they will ask you is, do you have the technology to enroll in this course? Okay, it is not something that's mandated, that, it's thrust down your throat that, oh, you have to enroll in this course. That's not how it is. You voluntarily enroll in the course. But for undergraduate students, we are actually, if we go completely online, we are actually mandating that they do everything online, which is completely different from a MOOCs environment. So I think part of the reason I feel that universities have to open up is this. It is just not possible to deliver the education that they need, especially given the fees, the high fees they are paying. It's just not possible in all disciplines. Some disciplines it may be, but others I don't think is possible.
Makes sense. Professor Sengupta, since you are more in the technology field, do you agree with what Professor Mazumder is seeing, or do you have a slightly different, I guess,
Viewpoint.
experience with your students?
Florida International is a kind of different type of a university. Although in terms of sheer enrollment, we are probably just a little shade under Ohio State, but a huge population of our university is already online. So I think the last time we did this, almost every 1/3 of every degree that we offer at FIU is also offered in an online manner. And the College of Business, of course, we are blessed with faculty really good with technology and willing to use technology in their classrooms. So we already had the experience, as Dr. Mazumder said, of teaching online. And every one of our programs also have online components. So we were the first college to transition. We actually transitioned in less than 48 hours. So the university gave us a mandate, and within 2 days, we went from face-to-face to remote at our university. But as you heard, that you can't do that with engineering, you can't do that with music, medicine. So, and even, I transitioned two of my, I was teaching 2 courses, and I transitioned to online. And I agree with Dr. Day is I would make jokes, but some people will respond and click on that reaction, the smile reaction, but you don't get to see them, especially if you are delivering some content. So I actually really reduced the amount of lectures. Zoom has breakout room facilities, so I started using that very heavily, put students in groups. But I would agree that the experience of the students, the face-to-face experience where students come in the classroom, work with other students, solving problems together, is not the same when they have to do it in a Zoom breakout room or something like that. So, and I am surprised that there were lawsuits that came up, and I think they probably came from the perspective of the high fees. FIU happens to be one of the lowest fee university in the Florida State university system. So there were actually less complaints from students about the online teaching experience. There were more complaints about the technology itself, like testing, for example. We transitioned to honor lock, and it was only moderately successful. And I would love to hear the rest of the panelists' view on this as well.
That's a great point. You a bit more future-proof there. Makes sense. Interestingly, I reached out to a few professors out there, and with the lawsuits out there, it's getting a little bit more difficult to have a candid conversation, actually, because this is not a pretty scenario. Let me. There are lots of questions coming online, and as well as questions that's been collected. Let me rattle off a few of the questions verbatim. So it's coming from freshmen or incoming freshmen folks. So very, very important questions from what they are going to expect as they enter. At the same time, as you hear the questions out, you will see the kind of the anxiety out there. Obviously, we can't probably address all these questions here in this setting, but I would kind of open up to every one of you to kind of pick out 1 or 2 questions and give your opinions. So let's see. Some of the questions are: How will it impact on classes and internships? Will classes be the same size? Will there be safety precautions? Do students need to pay housing and food fees even though online school is a possibility? Interesting. Should students avoid taking business courses until we get to the campuses? How would field research subjects or college sports be conducted? How can students better prepare to stay relevant if these disruptions continue until we graduate? How would they accommodate students in the dorms for freshmen? Uh, Lots of questions out there. Professor Day, you want to kind of start off with some of your thoughts and we'll go around the horn?
Sure. So as far as the housing question is concerned, I think in most cases they will refund or will not charge the housing and the food, the meal plan that you are in, simply because you are not availing of those opportunities. I know my daughter goes to a private university and she got a portion of her money back in terms of food and lodging. So I'm assuming that many universities will follow that. In terms of the experience overall, I mean, students don't come to campus just for classes. University is an experience for them, and they're missing out on that experience. And I don't know how they can be compensated back for that. I don't have any idea for that. I can tell you, my daughter, she's doing all the online classes, and she talks about lack of motivation, not having her peers around, and being able to concentrate and things like that. From an instruction point of view, we were asked to flip the classroom to make it a better environment, and I have tried to do that. Pretty much most of the material that I teach, they have been already recorded and they're available to them in an asynchronous setting. And we wanted to use the classroom just for question answer, doing hands-on work and things like that. It doesn't work because half the class or 60% of the class just does not feel motivated to go over the video recording that I have already posted. So when they come, I'm teaching again. So there are issues that we have not thought about. I mean, people have complaints about the technology itself. They feel that the technology is not safe. And indeed, there has been cases, we are using Zoom as a platform, and there are cases where Zoom has been hacked. I know Taiwan and Singapore banned Zoom. So and then there are obviously geopolitical issues associated with that, and so, but yeah, there are quite a few challenges, and I wish I had answers to them, but unfortunately I don't.
Yeah, lots of issues to work through. Professor Ray, from your perspective, what do you how do you address these freshman type of questions?
So the freshman type of questions, some of the things, as Professor Day mentioned, this means like we really don't know, especially for freshmen during the first year, they want to enjoy the university atmosphere as much as possible. Maybe they will get more serious when they go to junior or senior year. So that is a big loss for the freshman people who are coming in, basically, because this is the time they wanted to enjoy the thing. And even if the university is open, there will be huge restrictions in terms of any type of social events and all. I'm pretty sure, at least, there will be huge restrictions in there. So even if they come in person, they will not be able to take advantage of the university atmosphere. I wanted to make one point about which was one of the questions, is about these internships, and especially at least three of the panelists are coming from the business school side, and as you know, many of these business schools have this. I think both Professor Day and Professor Sengupta, the analytics programs and all these types of private programs, which has this issue of internships, which is a big deal. And this is, again, both Canadian government and to some extent US government, some of them require for the international students, which is a large portion of some of these private programs, to be physically present in order to get the papers to work at least. So, and this will become a huge problem for some of these universities with the private programs, basically, that how will you deal with these internships and the issue of connections, the issue of networking. Will someone from India or China, the international students, will they be willing to pay these huge fees for these private programs if it is totally online? Or if they have to come, many of these programs are 1 year long. Even if it is only fall or middle of winter, it's half of the program is gone online, basically. What will happen with this? So for many of this, and many of the business schools are highly dependent on these private programs as an extra source of funding. So this will be, and also the government, another issue the universities will be facing is that what will happen to the government funding? All of us are depend on government funding. The governments are spending so much money in different things, and surely down the road there will be cut in terms of the fundings from the government to the universities expected. So this will be, it's not only a question of the funding going forward. One is the student experience, another is this issue of internship and this the issue of the placements and the internships, and the third part is funding. All these three things are coming to the universities at the same time.
Great points, Professor Ray. We have to discuss a bit more on the international students' perspective. I think that is a must. Questions are coming in, and let me ask. Given the internship question, the federal work study program, Professor Mazumder, can you comment on that part? How will that be impacted, if you know?
I don't know officially what's going to happen, but practically, of course, there will be, I mean, if colleges don't reopen, then obviously you don't have work to do on campus, plain and simple, because many of these work study jobs are jobs, for example, where a student is just sitting in an office, helping with scanning documents, Xeroxing documents, and so on, or working in the library, sorting books. These require physical presence. You cannot do them online. There may be, I would guess, 25 to 50% jobs, work study kind of jobs that would still remain, which you can perform online. But for the most of it, I think these jobs will just become non-existent because you're simply not able to do it if you're not physically there. So yes, that is a big concern. And, we have been talking about internships. I have been already getting a lot of emails from students asking about that. In fact, I've been getting a lot of emails from students saying that, Professor, I had a very lucrative, good job offer. And these are from very bright students, good job offer starting in June, but now they have postponed the starting date to October. And even that is uncertain. Do you know of anybody who may be able to give me a part-time position somewhere in the local area? That kind of question. Because these students, the seniors who are graduating, they are simply in survival mode right now. They were up high in the sky because they had $100,000 plus job offers already, several of them on their plates. And now they're struggling to even put food on their plates. And this is happening to a lot of seniors, by the way, not just one or two. Vast majority of seniors who are in the at least in the professional degrees like, engineering, business, architecture, those kinds of professions. So it's very sad, and I don't know what the answer to this is, how this can be fixed. I mean, internships is almost secondary now. Just getting regular jobs is such a challenge. Companies are shutting down. I mean, hiring interns is the last thing they're thinking of actually at this point. So I don't know what the answer to this is. It's kind of sad, and no one has the answers and the solution really.
Just one, Raj, very related to that, I wanted to make a comment that indeed our demand for the summer courses have gone through the roof because so many internships have been cancelled. Because of that, we are actually adding a number of summer courses because at least the students are thinking, hopefully it will be better in fall when some of these things will come back. Let me take some of the courses during the summer.
And let me point out that during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, when people lost their jobs, they went back to school. So school education business actually boomed. Now, this time around, it's quite different. People are losing jobs. At the same token, how do you go back to school? Yeah, online could be a great option, but going back to school physically, I think everybody's going to think about that twice, how to manage that. Professor Sengupta, there are some questions coming from parents that are very, very important safety questions. One parent is asking, how are colleges planning to isolate infected students? And kind of goes back to this discussion of tracing and all of that. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, contact tracing is definitely the top in our, and we have to provide a solution to not just students, but also parents and faculty and staff as well. So as I mentioned that at FIU, we are looking at several options, and at the bottom of all of these options, at the one that is going to make or break any of these is the trust factor. That people who get infected, and we already have a process right now with anyone who gets infected are required to call in there is a specific university hotline that they're supposed to call and report that they have been infected. In fact, since when we shut down, or slightly before we shut down, we actually started this process because we had spring break right around that time. And in Florida, as you know, many, it's like a tourist destination. So, and as far as internships are concerned, our biggest internship provider is Royal Caribbean. So we are a big vacation destination. So we had actually gone first step that anybody who has been to a destination, which at that point was Italy, some places in Europe and China, Japan, but things have changed since then. So contact tracing is definitely going to be big. I think all universities are looking at how we can provide these solutions. And since we do have some amount of control within the university anyway, we already have some safeguards that we have put in place. So as I said, June 1st, we're going to open for essential staff and administration, for example. So if nothing changes, I will have to report back to work on June 1st. But at that time, we're considering a number of options. For example, masks, and we are thinking of actually branding masks to every staff and faculty. But then question arises, how do you teach wearing a mask? I mean, I can hardly breathe and walk when I'm wearing a mask these days. How am I going to teach? So there are several different types of options that we're putting in place. But at the top, I think we need to make our parents in the audience to feel that that is definitely health is the top priority. And I do not want to, go into any political issues right now, but to us, every person's health is the highest priority. So if anybody is uncomfortable coming into campus, we have, at least at FIU, we have about 50% of our classrooms have this system called Media Site, where you can teach and provide a video conferencing at the same time. So we're going to make sure all of our technology is up and running. We're going to give students the option of either coming into campus or not, and we'll create limits on how many students can come into the classrooms. And as I mentioned, there will be an app that they have to, almost like an attendance, before you come into campus, you log into the app and you basically report your temperature, and the app will give you the recommendation on whether you should stay home or come to campus.
So app is sounds like, and I'm seeing MIT and other institutions are also working on the apps. Maybe there is some level of collaboration that happens within different universities to come up with a more standardized way of dealing with privacy and all kinds of PII data management and all of that. But it just sounds like app is gonna be almost a must out there. You touched on something, mask and gloves, and some of the parents over here, they're also worried about that. They're asking that question. They know that kids are not very fond of them. So
nobody is.
Yeah, and neither do the professors probably. But regardless, Professor Mazumder and Professor Day, your perspectives on masks, and then please give your thoughts on a bit on the we talked about a incoming freshman student, and I know it's probably far-fetched to think about the juniors in high school, but as you can imagine, they're gonna go through the admission process very soon, probably starting next month. They're gonna start to work on that, and in the next 6, 7, 8 months. What would be your advice, given all the common knowledge is out the window now, and we are working on a new normal, new paradigm? What would be advice to the juniors in high school? Could you give your commentaries as well? Professor Day, if you want to start off.
Sure. Given when they will be coming into the campus, which is more than a year away, I think they should just plan normally at this point. They don't have to think about this in particular. Hopefully by then everything will be fine. I mean, if this carries on for more than a year, then I don't know what the outlook is. I don't think it will, or even if it does, I think we'll have to return back to normalcy. We'll have to treat this as one of those hazards that's out there, just like road accidents and other things. We'll just have to treat it that way if it continues for that long. So I think for the juniors, my suggestion would be just treat this as normal and don't try to overthink, because we don't know what things are changing, what regulations will be under, and what the condition of the economy would be. There are so many uncertainties that it's probably not worth thinking about it, because you are not going to come up with any better decision. in terms of which university you choose, where you go, and so on and so forth. So we'll have to assume that we will be 100% normal by then. In terms of students who are coming in this fall, of course, that still remains shrouded in uncertainty. As I told, we have been asked to come in and resume normal, operations starting fall. But we have also been asked that, be ready in case that does not pan out properly. So I think that's how I'll take it.
Okay. Professor Mazumder, do you have any advice for the from a admission criteria standpoint? Do you see things maybe shifting, maybe changing, and the things that juniors should be more concerned about?
Not really. I don't think the admission criterion will change, and I agree with Professor Day that the juniors who are applying or planning to apply this fall should just stick to the gun and do whatever they have been asked to do in the past and follow the same procedure. However, I think they will face some difficulties, and the difficulties have to do with building their resume or portfolio, because a lot of activities, this is sort of crunch time for them, spring and summer, where this is their last opportunity to bolster their resume or portfolio, whatever you're looking at. So there will be some challenges there, but I do think that the university admission committees will take that into account, as they are for everything else that's going on. For example, at Ohio State, tenure clocks have been pushed back by 1 year without even asking for it. So those things are happening, and I think that will be factored in during the admission process. Now, there is one question that you raised in the list of questions that you had sent us, which I thought was very, very interesting, and perhaps the other members of the panel can chime in on that, is the question of selectivity. Do you select now universities that are close to your home location with the thought that perhaps some of the education will be online, and if there's an upsurge in the number of infections, maybe the universities will be forced to shut down again and you will be back home again? So would you actually go from New York to LA to attend school, or would you rather just stick to your local area? I think that is a very critical question, because the economics also plays a huge role in this, and obviously parents have to factor in this issue when they decide what they're going to do. There is also the question of, can the parents actually accommodate the child in their own home? I mean, I've been hearing stories from my students where 5 siblings have gone back home and they don't even have a place to sit and do their homework because their parents have scaled down after they moved to college. So I think that is a very critical decision that even that juniors will have to make. Should I choose a college that is perhaps closer to home, because with the possibility that I might have to come back?
Well said. No, this is something that I have a junior at home, and they are, I know they are worrying about, and the senior, they are worrying about, particularly on the sports arena, how would things pan out, given that they lost their track season, cross country season potentially. You get only so many shots to make and to be noticed or to give your accomplishment. I'm sure that's true for different sports as well as different performing arts, and where kids have a chance to make a dent, and they were planning to do so. Now they have to probably, as both of you said, now they may have to plan to reorient themselves a little differently to deal with the situation and make the most out of it. Lots of questions coming on. There are questions around uh, um, retail and kind of impacting supply chain, even though it's not a clear question for the education panel here, college education panel here. But Professor Ray, if you could give some of your commentaries, as let me rattle off one question here quickly. What kind of advanced analytics or predictive analytics or conversational artificial intelligence can improve retail industry after COVID? And Professor Ray and Professor Sengupta, since both of you are kind of close to either retail or some of the challenges with the analytics perspective, could you give some commentary, and then we'd like to move on to international perspective a bit, given all of you are potentially impacted in positive or negative way. Want to hear on that as well. Professor Ray?
Yeah, so one of the things obviously is this issue of move to online. So this issue of e-commerce will become, and how do you change from how to, it was already going, but how can you get this has put a huge push towards e-commerce, and how the retail industry will change itself to the e-commerce thing. And there is this issue of, after we come out of this disaster, will there be only two companies left in the retail? Basically, it's Walmart and Amazon. Those are the only two companies left, and everyone else is gone out. So that's a huge problem of that. There will be a monopolistic situation coming into the picture, given the type of technology that will be required, the type of things that will be required. Will people go to their local? On the one hand, they want the local supply chains, the local consumer, but on the other hand, this benefits that you get from some of these bigger players in the retail in terms of their what they can bring to the table in terms of the technology, that will be very, very difficult for the smaller players to do. So we want to, in terms of this retail and in terms of this analytics, we will see a big change, that perhaps there will be a huge amount of consolidation in the near term, at least. After that, we do not know what will happen, but there will be a huge amount of consolidation in the near term. And some of the smaller companies, already we have seen a lot of the smaller companies starting to fold, and this will be even more in the near term. And we are going to see the bigger companies with their technology, with their ahead of the curve things that they were already doing in terms of e-commerce getting into the picture, basically.
Okay. Professor Sengupta, any thoughts on the analytics, predictive analytics, how it could potentially help, as well as if you are dealing with AR or VR, and if that helps any?
Rajesh, we were actually following some of your work when everything got started. I was actually following your inflection point work in terms of predictive analytics. So definitely analytics is going to be huge. In terms of virtual reality and augmented reality, I don't know. We have not done a lot of work, particularly in retail, but we do know that the small businesses that Dr. Ray were talking about, that many of them are folding. A lot of them are also starting alternatives to their businesses. Miami, for example, is huge in restaurant business. And we had an interesting news recently that many restaurants are actually become like mini grocery stores these days. So they're actually not only selling cooked food, but they're also selling things like flour, for example. That's getting sold out in big grocery stores. So now these small restaurants that are finally starting to open up, at least for delivery and carry out food, they're also becoming active in these other supply areas. And particularly in areas like Miami, where there's people from all kinds of different backgrounds and levels of education and prosperity. Not everybody can go to Amazon and things like that and order. So they have to rely on these smaller businesses. So I think both in terms of technology and analytics, as well as in terms of just business sense on who is going to come out better at the end of this. So I think at least I don't think it's all doom and gloom. There are lots of, I do see a lot of, silver linings in the cloud. And I think that is something that we all need to look forward to when we are able to open. Obviously, the scientists are going to be a big part of this recovery. If we are to come back, there's got to be a vaccine or a treatment of COVID-19. That's it.
Can I just jump in, Rajarshi,
Yeah.
here? I think predictive analytics would actually differentiate these businesses even further. So big businesses, because of their technology advantage, because of their possession of huge cache of data, they are the ones who will be able to, if there is any way we can make use of analytics better, they are the one who will be better poised to use that. So that will further, make the division. They will make the division a lot more further, and I think big businesses will do better than small businesses in that sense.
Exactly, that's my point. That they have already a leg up on some of the small businesses. I agree with Arijit that many of them are trying to change from B2B to B2C. They are trying very much, but some of the things that the consumers are expecting, that the big businesses are already has a leg up compared to the smaller ones there.
Yeah.
No, that's very, very valid points. Let's move to the international side, and we are almost close to the end of the show. And I can't imagine time just flew by, and we still have tons of questions left. International perspective, and Professor Mazumder, could you give your perspective on international, and then kind of combine with the thought that some of the budgetary shortfalls that are almost imminent, and it may even cut into endowment in some cases. Probably not as much of an impact to big colleges like all of you are representing, but and public as well, but probably for more for the private big colleges, as well as the smaller colleges. But taking everything into consideration, what would be your outlook and your thoughts for international students? Should they just think about it business as usual, or should they maybe kind of drop a year, come back to it later? And sometimes it's not even an international question about dropping a semester or a year. It's a domestic question as well, because I'm getting that question from internally here is instead of getting online course, should we drop a semester? So give your perspective on that, please.
So first of all, on international students, obviously you have to distinguish between undergraduate and graduate education. On the undergraduate front, I mean, if you look at the Big Ten schools or schools of a similar nature, similar size, they don't typically have a large population of international undergraduate applicants. Maybe nowadays 5 to 10%. This is different from obviously the Ivy League schools and some of the schools of that reputation, like Stanford, where you do get a lot of international applicants. But schools like Illinois, Purdue, Ohio State, Penn State, they don't get a lot of international applicants at the undergraduate level. So in terms of the revenue that's earned from these students, I think it will be a very small piece of the pie. Graduate students, of course, is a different issue, but then graduate students, on the other hand, they don't often pay tuition. They earn stipend. The university pays them. So it's the opposite, but they are a big part, an important part of the workforce. I mean, even thinking about, I mean, at Ohio State, we now have a seed funding program to develop masks, okay? This started 1 month ago, and there are 5 or 6 groups who have been awarded grants, and these include professors and their graduate students who are working relentlessly in their labs to come up with masks I mean, masks not like for individual use, for use by the medical community, advanced masks, PPEs. So I think that will suffer. But on the other hand, graduate student from international or international graduate students have been on the decline for a while now. And, again, I don't want to get into politics, but we know the reason why. So they have been on a decline, and I think this will trigger more of that. Getting to your other point of whether we should take a semester off or a year off, and as you said, this is a domestic question too. Honestly, I don't know the answer, but let's put the question in a different perspective and say, okay, suppose you dropped 1 year and next year you're back to the same problem. What then? Okay. So it's a question of, which is the bigger of the two risks? In my mind, people should just think about business as usual and continue. Dropping a year or a semester would make sense when you know that there is a definitive solution at the end of this. For example, if you talk about what happened in 2008 with the market going down, there you could pretty much say that, okay, after 1 year things will not be like this. But this is a situation where none of us know what it will be after 1 year. We might be back to square one and even worse. So I think it's too much of a risk to just drop 1 year and pretend as if, because there is an economic factor to that also. You're just sitting at home doing nothing for 1 year. So I think just going along with whatever you have and doing the best out of it would probably be my advice to the students out there who are applying this year, rather than sitting it out 1 year.
Yeah, makes sense. Dr. Day, do you have any thoughts on international students?
Yeah. So first of all, if you sit out 1 year, actually that 1 year will feel like 5 years.
Yeah.
When you have nothing to do, that's one thing. International student wise, actually business schools are a lot more dependent these days on international students. And those who come into the MBA program, they actually pay their tuition. So that's going to impact us somewhat in terms of our class sizes and all that. Second thing is that we rely on international students for, TAs and RAs and things like that. So with that supply stopping, that will be a problem for us. From what I understand, many of the consulates are closed. So they cannot come for this fall. International students cannot come. In fact, um, we are pretty sure that they will not be able to join us. So that will definitely create a problem for us. Budget-wise, the state schools are, it's not just the private schools. The state schools are going to be impacted quite a bit. We have been told to be prepared for at least 25% budget cut. 25% budget cut is huge. We are already starting plans on furloughs and things. Prepared for at least 25% budget cut. Yeah. So we have been told that there would be furloughs and things like that. So I don't know how that will pan out. So if you look at it from a financial point of view, the situation is actually pretty grim. I just heard that Akron University closed down 6 of their 11 schools and colleges. So the university has become less than half. So I think that is something that we will see, that we will continue to see.
Dr. Ray, you have a ton of students coming from international, all over different countries. What's the impact you are looking at?
So for us, even different from what Sandip said, for us, even our undergraduates, roughly 20 to 25% are international, and which are the high-paying international students. And that will surely be a big impact. And in terms of taking 1 year off, means this is one, obviously the question was from the student side, but if we think about from the university side, do you give deferral to them or not? That's a big question that the universities has to do, because if you give deferral, you cannot take double the number of students next year. So this year you will be half, and the next year you will be back to, so this will take a huge hit to your finances and budgets. So on the one hand, you understand you need to give some perhaps deferral, especially for the international students. And many of the international students perhaps will ask, as Professor Dey mentioned about that even if they want to come, the consulates are closed, they cannot get the visas on time, they cannot join at least in the fall, maybe in winter, all these things. But from the university side, do you give deferral or not? Because if you give deferral, what will happen next year? The people who are coming in, because your capacity is limited in most of the other things. So the support services, the capacities are limited. So what you do in that case? And the second, and in terms of the international, we are dependent, the university as a whole is dependent to quite a bit of extent on undergraduate tuition, the international tuition, and especially the business schools are dependent very heavily in the graduate side on the private programs. So this one will be a issue for all of the cases, that, and especially many of the students in the graduate programs in the business school come because of the internships, because of this, that they can work after they graduate. And if they are not physically here, and if they are not allowed to work, will they pay that much of money to get into those programs?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of great observations here, and we are almost at the end of the show. I want to thank all of you for taking the time. Last round of not a question, but your commentary for your final thoughts with the students and the parents. From your perspective, Dr. Sengupta, if you want to start off with that.
I always tell people that always look at the bright side. I think, we hear a lot of bad news these days, but at the same time, there are many positives as well. The way businesses are handling, how can they create alternate revenue streams is changing, and they're being forced to change, and that's not always a bad thing. And there are many good news in terms of we are hearing people getting better job offers now because they are better trained with online technologies, virtual teams, and things like that. So it's not all bad news. Obviously, as I said before, it's up to the science community to come up with a cure or a vaccine for this. And once that happens, I think we will roar right back. That is my view.
Dr. Day?
Yeah, I I always like to look at positive things, positive side of things. I think there are two positive sides for me. One is we are not alone. All of us are in it together. And as a result of that, I think we are going to come out stronger. We are going to come out more efficient. Especially from a university point of view, I can tell you that there has always been some complacency. There has been a lack of innovation, resistance towards adopting technology in a proper way. We teach about digital transformation, but we are very slow in terms of digital transformation. This will actually make universities a lot more efficient in terms of how we bring the material to the students and educate them. I think overall, as a society, we'll come out stronger out of this.
Makes sense. Dr. Ray?
I agree with the points made that there will be positives which will come out. Perhaps we are not seeing the positive as much as we want at this point of time, but we would come out. And the thing is that the universities, like the business, the digital transformation, which has started changing business even before this, now it will come to the universities, and the professors are becoming much more comfortable, at least whatever extent possible, in terms of online teaching. And also there will be in terms of the efficiency, the universities will have a lot of positives out of it. But I still think the main thing is that the student experience will the whole thing, will the form of the universities change very drastically, or if things go away, are we back to the usual things again next year? That's the whole thing I am very interested to see. I do not have a comment on that, but I am very interested to see what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And final thought from Dr. Mazumder.
Yeah, so I agree completely with what has been said with the sentiments. I think we are in this all together. There are a certain set of responsibilities that students have to take. There are a certain set of responsibilities that faculty and administrators have to take to make the best out of the situation. Things will not be perfect. Things will not even probably be 50% of perfect, but we have to make the best out of the situation. And I think for students who are starting on this journey, going to college or applying to colleges, I think the best advice I have is to continue on that path. You know, you've worked so hard for the last 10 years to accomplish this dream. Continue on that path. This thing will pass sooner or later, and you will have a great college experience. Maybe it will be 3 years out of 4 years, but be that as it may, it will still be a great experience. And as I said, we are all in this together, and things will finally turn around. So don't give up hope. As Professor Day said, it's hard to motivate yourself, but if you can continue to do that and just stick to the gun, I think things will improve, and there will be bright light at the end of the tunnel.
Well said. There is hope. Don't give up hope, and try to live in harmony. I'll quote Tagore, as probably it's apt for this weekend. The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. Perhaps we got to find a balance, some more within humanity and perhaps with nature as well. What's I'll go one more round here and ask what's keeping you sane? Any piece of song, any poetry or anything else that's keeping you sane out there? Who goes first?
As a geek, I can go first, and I can tell you I'm picking up new hobbies. My daughter and I, we have started on building robotics, creating robotic toys at home, and we are both having a lot of fun with it.
Perfect.
So Raj, as you know, you and I share this passion for theater. And of course, theater you cannot do without meeting people. But we are finding new ways to use Zoom and Skype to come up with new productions. So that's something that's keeping me busy.
That's perfect. In fact, Dr. Mazumder is also a theater personality, so that's great. Dr. Ray, your muse?
I was very busy with some of the courses, but now I am getting into some of this, getting into more the songs side of the things, basically new songs that I am learning, not learning, but hearing from my daughter, which I didn't know that these types of songs exist. So I'm trying to learn from my daughter, which are the new things, and trying to see TikToks from my daughter that how these things work. So I'm learning a lot from my daughter in that respect, basically. So that's trying to keep me sane. Yes. So
that's perfect. That's perfect. And finally, Dr. Mazumder.
So yeah, for me, just spending a lot of time with my family has been really rewarding. My wife and I, we go for walks every evening. We watch movies almost every day. My son joins sometimes. It's kind of rare, but he does sometimes. And then the other thing is, of late, I've been playing a lot of music. So that has also been keeping me going. So
yeah,
thank you again for hosting this. It's been a pleasure.
You have to hear Dr. Mazumder out with his guitar. He's got a few clips and absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to this panel. This has been terrific, and thank you for what you do. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, Rajoshi.
thank you.
Thanks very much.